Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Today, as you doubtless heard during immigration talks, President Trump said something that almost every single person in America actually agrees with. An awful lot of immigrants come to this country from other places that aren't very nice. Those places are dangerous, they're dirty, they're corrupt, and they're poor. And that's the main reason those immigrants are trying to come here, and you would too if you live there. President Trump asked why America doesn't receive more immigrants from places you might want to visit on vacation. Why aren't we getting more people from Norway, he said, which by almost any measure, including the UN's measures, is the most developed and richest country in the world. While saying this, Trump used an expletive, and that's not surprising either, since he uses them all the time and was speaking privately. And yet, for some reason, virtually everyone in Washington, New York, and L.A. considered this a major, major event. Why is that? To find out, we're joined by Jose Parra. He was Latino Communications Director for Barack Obama's 2012 campaign, and he joins us in the studio. Jose, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for the opportunity, Tom.
So I think it's, I mean, of course you can have a debate over what countries we ought to admit immigrants from, and I think we're kind of having that debate. But what bothers me about the explosion this afternoon is the dishonesty in it. And I'll just give you one example. Joan Walsh over on CNN, an analyst over there, was asked just a minute ago, would you rather live in Haiti or Norway? And she said with a straight face, I can't say. Now, that's lying. If we've gotten to the point where we all have to pretend that every country is exactly as nice as every other country, then we're being dishonest.
No, it's basically they're talking about, I think the outrage here is about the insult and the expletive that is attached to the people who come from these countries and who are making a life here in the United States, contributing fully to the U.S. right now. They were talking specifically about El Salvador and Haiti, two countries where TPS was recently revoked by the Trump administration.
Right.
And between these countries, we're talking about the people from those countries. They're contributing close to $170 billion in GDP.
No, look, but I'm not. I mean,
and they're making a full contribution.
Well,
to the economy
it's actually a pretty. It's a complicated picture. But I agree with you. If you're saying that a lot of the people who come from those countries are good people, of course I completely agree. But the idea that you're not allowed to say that they're pretty crummy countries, Haiti, for example, or El Salvador, I've been in both of them. That's why people are leaving them to come here. So I don't understand what the sin is. You're not allowed to point out that other countries aren't as good places to live as America? Like, what is the problem?
There is definitely an issue here because basically what's happening here is that the president is connecting and articulating the same vision that we saw in Charlottesville. When they're talking about we won't replace you, what the chanters and the marchers were talking about this time, it's the same thing. And it's
not the same thing.
Look, and it's the same.
Slow down.
What happened to the huddled masses that on the Statue of Liberty that we're talking about?
Try and track with me here, okay? The president, from what we know, and maybe he said other things we don't know about, but what we know, he said these countries are crummy places, okay? They're holes or whatever. He used profanity. But the people who left those countries, some of them rode trains all the way through Mexico or hid in a wheel well of a plane to leave, they would agree with that. So why the outrage? Is it you have to lie and pretend, as Joan Walsh does, that, I don't know, I'd live in Norway or Haiti? Like, we've gotten to a place where nobody can be honest about anything. Do you see the point?
Well, first of all, one of the things is that do we apply the same metric to Eastern Europe? We're talking about countries that are not doing too well right now in crime measures and economic measures and other issues.
But we seem moving to Romania.
But we seem to be applying this only to countries where there are brown people, such as Haiti and El Salvador.
Let's be totally
real. We're talking about Norway, like you said yesterday, which again ties back to this social reengineering that they're trying to.
I don't want to get all fact-based on you, but Norway is, according to the United Nations. Well, here are some. The United Nations says that Norway is the most developed country in the world. Its sovereign wealth fund, I think, is the biggest in the world because of the oil discoveries offshore there. As you know, it's the richest place in the world, okay? Haiti is the poorest place in the hemisphere and has been for a long time. People are actually staying in this country right now legally because Haiti is so bad, we don't think they should have to return. So if you say Norway is a better place to live, and Haiti's kind of a hole. Anyone who's been to those countries or has lived in them would agree. But we're jumping up and down. Oh, you can't say that. Why can't you say that?
Well, let me tell you something. Most people in Norway, according to most polls, do not want to live under Trump's America right now.
That's fine. You're kind of missing the point, which is
because it's a question about values.
Okay.
You know, you are attaching this label to people who come from predominantly brown countries, and that is a problem.
I don't know why.
And that is how decisions on TPS are being made.
Okay. No,
you know, when you take away legal status, because these people were here legally.
Okay, hold on. Can I just ask you again? Let me try to ask you a reasonable
from people
question.
who are contributing, to this country, then you know, are you using
But
the
hold on,
statute or are you using
wait a
prejudice
second.
to make
Jose,
those decisions?
Right. Prejudice, racism, white supremacy, fine. But let's get back to it. So you're
Norway,
saying
Haiti, I mean...
one is the richest country in the world. The other is one of the poorest countries in the world. You think it's immoral to point that out. It's a statement of values. I'm asking you a very simple question. If Haiti isn't such a bad place, why don't we say to the people who are here temporarily in refuge from Haiti, go back, it's great. We don't say that because it's not great. Actually, it's everything the president said it was. It's not an attack on Haitians. It's an acknowledgement that their country is not as nice as other countries. And if you can't even say that out loud without being called a racist by people like you and the morons over on MSNBC,
oh, you're
then
just calling me a moron.
I'm not calling you a moron. I'm saying anybody who says that's a racist statement should explain how it is. And you can't. You said it's like Charlottesville. How is it like Charlottesville?
Look, we're talking about a predominantly white country, and we're talking about a predominantly African country, or people of African descent. And the president...
So you're not allowed to say that because of it? How about crime measures, income, corruption? I mean, like, what are you talking about?
The president just said a few weeks ago that everybody in Haiti has AIDS, and that's one of the reasons why he wanted to cancel TPS, even though these people are here and they've been vetted, you know, time and time again.
I mean, look,
no, you do know.
No,
you know, so
I'm addressing
when you're
the thing that we
attaching,
know that he
when you're
said for
attaching
sure.
all these labels to an entire population of people, that is problematic, especially coming from the leader of the free world.
Look, I'm going to speak for myself here when I say, again, I think there are plenty of great people from Haiti, and a lot of people who leave from Haiti do well. I've met a ton of Haitians. There are a lot in Miami, and a lot of them have done well. But the truth is that when people from poor countries, not a measure of their moral stature, but when you come from a poor country, you are likely, much more likely to be poor when you're here. And there's a lot of poverty already here, in case you haven't driven across the country. And so there's a real question about how much more we want to import.
I come from a working class family, by the way, so I do know.
Then you can't look at me and say that's racist. So, for example, I have the numbers on where our immigrants come from. Last year we had 23,000 immigrants from El Salvador. I'm sure all great people. We had 404 from Norway. So we overwhelmingly give advantage to very poor countries. And it's an honest question, not a racial one. What effect does that have on the poverty rate in this country?
I can tell you that, well, this is a free market network, and I would imagine that you follow the basic laws of economics. When you have people creating demand, and when you have people paying into the tax system, like this 23,000 people from the 23,000 number that you just mentioned.
From El Salvador.
From El Salvador, or the 200,000 who have TPS and the status was just revoked by the administration last week, you are taking that contribution away from the economy. And these people are going to Walmart, they're buying gas, they're buying clothes,
Let me ask you
they're
this,
going
then.
to supermarkets,
so let's take a look
and they are stimulating local and national economy.
So you're speaking in generalizations. And again, I actually admire
the president also is speaking in generalizations.
Okay, here's some specifics. These are the rates of welfare use by country. These are families that are using at least one welfare program in the United States. From Central and South American immigrants, it's 73%.
Can you tell me where that comes from?
This is from CIS, Center for Immigration Studies, the people who keep the numbers on this. And then from South Asia, a non-white region, it's 17%.
By the way, it's CIS coming from the Tanto Network.
I'm not saying that people from South Asia are better than from Central America. I'm just saying there's an economic cost in bringing people over who are more likely to go on public services and who are poorer. That's not a racial attack. It's an economic observation in a country that has a ton of poor people already. And you have no answer for that other than, oh, it's Charlottesville.
Well, you're talking about social reengineering, the whole worry here. And that's why they want to do away with family-based migration. Because family-based migration, it's what they consider is leading to the browning of America, and that's the whole issue here.
No, that is your fever dream. I'm throwing some actual economic statistics at you that you can't answer, and you're getting back to the black, brown, white thing. And I'm asking
I just gave you numbers on the GDP impact from people from El Salvador and from people from Haiti right now.
If people from poor countries are much more likely to go on welfare and make less. Doesn't mean they're bad people, but it means the cost of having them here is higher than people from other regions. That's reality.
I've seen other studies that actually say that immigrants are no more likely to go on welfare than
I would be fascinated to see that study because it doesn't exist. The rate
it does exist.
No, it doesn't. The rate of American families on using at least one welfare program is 30%. Now, that's higher than immigrants from South Asia, for example. You're absolutely right. But the preponderance of our immigrants, excuse me, aren't coming from South Asia. They're coming from Latin America. And those rates are really high. And I think we have a right to ask questions about that. But you say it's racist.
I can tell you something. Have you heard of the 5-year bar?
I don't know what the 5-year bar is.
Well, the 5-year bar is a law that Congress passed that doesn't allow an immigrant, once they regularize their status, to access welfare. So I would like to know, how is it that you're coming up with those numbers
Does it
when law
them?
Right now prevents people from using welfare?
Right, yeah.
Unless you're, of course, factoring things such as when you get a scholarship, when you get a scholarship or public education, and public education is actually an investment into the country. Yeah. So if you're considering that, if that's what you're factoring in as welfare,
ask you a question.
That's really problematic.
Right. Okay. So. About half of all immigrants.
And you can look up the 5-year bar in the Library of Congress.
But let me just speak to the reality rather than the law. The law
is reality, by the way.
Actually, the law is not reality.
Yes, it is.
If the law was reality, we wouldn't be having this debate right now.
I could tell you right now, because I know a lot of people who are not able to access Medicare because of the 5-year bar.
About half of all immigrants from El Salvador right now are living at or near the poverty line. Again, doesn't mean they're bad people. It's not an attack on them. But that's not true for immigrants from other regions of the world. Again, why is it immoral for Americans to make the calculation? What makes us more prosperous and what makes us less prosperous?
Most of the people who are going to be living near the poverty line are usually because they're undocumented and they are not able to participate in the full-time economy. The people who have been regularized through a program like TPS, there's studies by construction associations around the country how they have moved to supervisory roles. They're well trained and they're producing jobs for other people. And they are generating, contributing,
there are plenty of immigrants to the economy. Who are well educated and well trained.
Right now, DACA students are contributing $280 billion to the GDP of the country.
You don't actually know a lot about these numbers, and you're just
yes, I do.
Some talk show.
Oh yes, I.
But let me ask you a theoretical question then, so we don't get into
where it comes from?
Of fake numbers.
Cato Institute.
Right,
Cato Institute and Forbes magazine, which I'm sure you consider that a leftist publication.
Right. Okay, let's get to a philosophical question. Do you think it's fair for American citizens who live here to decide who comes on the basis of who will potentially help our country more?
In 1965, we changed the laws in this country to be closer to family-based migration because we were using quotas. We were using quotas.
We're using quotas now.
8 to 1. Dreamers to stay in the country. So if you're asking about how many Americans are looking for, most support DACA and to regularize the status of dreamers.
If you can't answer a question, it is counterproductive just to filibuster. Is it, do you think, at least theoretically allowed for Americans to say, hold on, let me finish. Let's figure out who's most likely to add to our economy, who's most likely to assimilate. Do you think it's okay, or is that racist, like everything else that I brought up? Is that okay to ask that question, or is it racist?
Immigrants do assimilate. As a matter of fact, I can tell you.
Is it fair for Americans to ask that question? What's good for us? Are we allowed to ask that question, or is that racist?
Who is we when you say Americans? Because right now, 86. Well, I don't know. You have to tell me who you define as Americans. How
about the majority of the electorate?
Well, I can tell you that 86. The latest poll that came out today says that 80% of Americans want dreamers to assimilate, including 2/3 of Republicans.
So I'm sorry. We're arguing apples and oranges.
No, we're not. We're arguing about immigrants.
Does a country have a right to decide who comes in and who doesn't come in?
Most Americans wanted immigration reform in 2013 by every poll.
Because you can't.
By every poll, and you guys tanked it in the House of Representatives. So it's not like you guys want to fix the system.
I think our viewers can determine where you're coming from. Jose, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Mark Stein is an author, a columnist, and, by the way, an immigrant. We'll let him decide whether his homeland was any sort of hole. He joins us tonight. So, Mark, I mean, maybe I'm, misreading this. And maybe there are things the president said that I didn't hear. I'm sure there were. But from what I could hear, he was saying, look, why would we give, apparently, preference to poor countries over rich ones? And that doesn't seem like a crazy thing to say.
Well, I think he's actually saying, why should we give preference to dysfunctional societies over others? And I'll say it if Jose won't. Until 50 years ago, every nation on earth, every Western nation particularly, thought it had the right to discriminate when it came to immigration among those countries and those people who would find it easier to assimilate and contribute to the country they were moving to. And if Jose Jose thinks you don't like black people or brown people, let's keep it all black. I think it's, I don't think, I agree with the president. I wish he'd formulated it more elegantly, but Haiti is a bleep hole, or whatever you want to call it. Barbados isn't. St. Kitts isn't. Grenada isn't. St. Lucia isn't. There are distinctions one can make, even within quite small groups of countries. And as to Joan Walsh refusing to say whether she'd rather move to Haiti or Norway, let's not wait for Joan. Let's wait for let's just look at the existing traffic. There are immigrants all over the world who move to Norway. Nobody voluntarily moves to Haiti. Why is that? Because it's a dysfunctional society, and so are many of the others from which America's present ludicrous immigration system takes newcomers from.
So here's my question. So China is the most aggressive colonial power in the world right now, and it's investing all over Africa and all over Latin America and all over the Caribbean, spending $30 billion in Haiti, for example. There's no pressure from Joan Walsh or the American left for the Chinese to absorb immigration from any of those regions at all. They're not denounced as racist for keeping their borders totally closed to everybody. Why is that, I wonder?
Well, because China is allowed to advance its own interests. So it's bought, for example, a big ton of bauxites in Jamaica, the bauxite industry in Jamaica. Yes. But it doesn't feel that along with that, it has to import a big bunch of Jamaicans to its country. And that is when people get object to what President Trump says, but it actually makes far more sense than if you look at what Pat Leahy said, who just sent out this eunuch tweet in response, bleating, "That's not who we are." It's not enough, actually, just to say, "That's not who we are." And in fact, that's the response to every one of these so-called problems. That's not who we are. Well, they never actually say who we are. They just say, "That's not who we are." And who we are seems to be devolving down into the people who say, "That's not who we are." Everybody else, China, Haiti, Norway, is allowed to be who we are and act as a nation in its own national interests, including on immigration policy.
Yeah, well, I think China could use a little more diversity, so we'll be pushing for that in future weeks. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Exactly. Thanks, Tucker.
Senator Lindsey Graham had some uncharitable words for this show and anyone who believes in real borders. Of course, he refused to join us, but we'll respond anyway next. Well, a couple of nights ago, the show was critical of President Trump's public immigration summit with congressional leaders, where the president indicated he was willing to step back from DACA negotiations personally and sign whatever deal that lawmakers agreed on. Senator Lindsey Graham was pleased with it, though. Watch.
I think the president did a fabulous job of talking about this problem. He did it in a smart way, in a compassionate way. And, his job is not to sell books. His job is not to carry a TV show. His job is to solve problems, and he's got to work with Democrats. And I was proud of my president yesterday.
Selling books. As if we could ever rival Senator Lindsey Graham for cynicism. We never could. And for the record, we never say anything on this program we don't sincerely believe. Can Lindsey Graham say the same? Chris Kobach is Secretary of State for Kansas, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Kobach, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I'm concerned because what we thought was never going to happen again appears to be happening, and that's the leadership of the Republican Party basically ignoring what its own voters want in favor of a deal that, again, fails to seal the border and give us actual security and the right to choose who comes here. Am I imagining that?
No, you're not imagining it. And the most troubling thing about that meeting on Tuesday that I saw was you had multiple Republicans repeating the mantra, we've got to do DACA, we've got to do DACA, we've got to give an amnesty for these people. Look, Tucker, you know that, and you've pointed this out, the DACA amnesty is bad for Americans. It's granting an amnesty to nearly 1 million people in their 20s and 30s, their average age is 24, who are going to compete against young Americans who have a 9% unemployment rate in that age group. And for the young Americans who don't have a college degree, it's a whopping 34% underemployment rate. So we're legalizing foreign nationals who have broken our laws to compete against Americans who can't get a job. So that's bad policy. In addition, it's going to cause another surge in illegal immigration. So the idea that we have to do this is ludicrous, and we should only even consider doing this if there are many, many law enforcement advantages that are given to it, like ending chain migration. I think we have to have mandatory E-Verify, and if we don't get everything we want to secure our borders, including the wall, then we walk away from the deal. We don't need to do DACA.
And not only do it, but put it right to the very top of the list of priorities of the U.S. Congress. Before everything, before the opioid crisis that's literally shortening the life expectancy of middle America, we need to do this. I feel sorry for some of the DACA recipients, for sure. I'm not attacking them. But it's not clear why, if you have any questions about it, you should take a moral lecture from a Republican senator who suggests that you're the cynical, heartless one when you raise questions about the effect on American citizens. How do we get to a place where Republican senators are lecturing us about how they're far better people than we are because they're for amnesty? How'd that happen exactly?
It's a great question. I mean, furthermore, as I'm sure you know, Tucker, Lindsey Graham and this group of 6 senators that came up with an even more generous mega amnesty, much bigger than DACA, that they have now announced that they favor. The point is, he seems to be giving away the store. He doesn't seem to care that much about all the damage that an amnesty does to hardworking Americans. And so you're absolutely right. And one other thing, the false urgency about all this is ludicrous, too. You know, there's the March 5th deadline that President Trump set, but all that happens on March 5th is that some of the DACA work permits start to expire. Day after day, some more expire. There's nobody showing up at their home with armed ICE agents with a vehicle to escort them out of the country that day. So the notion that we have to rush to grant a bad amnesty is simply false.
Yeah, it is false. I'm amazed that Senator Graham has taken time out from advocating for war with Iran to take this position, but he has. And I was grateful to have you put it in context. Mr. Secretary, thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
A Vermont newspaper editor just lost his job for raising questions about gender politics. That editor joins us next. It's increasingly clear that corporate America is now the left's ideological enforcer. It couldn't be clearer, and it's not just happening in Silicon Valley. Until this week, Dennis Finley was an editor at the Burlington Free Press in Vermont, but the Gannett media giant unceremoniously fired him this Tuesday after he tweeted questions about a Vermont proposal to create a third gender option for driver's licenses. Why'd they do that? Well, Dennis Finley joins us tonight to answer that question. Dennis, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker. Thanks for having me.
So the reason I want to talk to you is I was sincerely, I'm not just saying this rhetorically, a little bit confused by your firing, since you didn't attack transgendered people. You didn't even attack the idea of a third sex on the driver's licenses from the tweets that I saw, but you asked questions to somebody else on Twitter. I didn't understand how that was out of bounds.
Well, I believe, Tucker, it was out of bounds because I didn't agree with it. I think it's as simple as that. There's a powerful contingent of speech police out there. This is an extremely liberal state, progressive state, and I kind of galvanized them unwittingly, and it went on all through the weekend, and they didn't want to stop until they had my head on a platter, and they finally got it on Monday evening.
But you say Vermont is liberal, but there's nothing liberal about taking a man's livelihood away because you disagree with him. That's not liberal. That's something else.
Well, you'd have to ask them, but I think they think it's a feather in their cap anytime they can get rid of somebody who disagrees with them. I think that's what's going on here.
But you're a journalist and have been for a long time, and isn't a kind of key tenet of journalism that you get to say what you think is true? The truth is a defense.
Truth is a defense. You get to say what is true, but in the age we live in, our companies, a lot of media companies say that we're supposed to be objective, impartial, et cetera, et cetera. I want to ask questions. I want to raise questions and raise issues because I think there are a lot of things going on that we have to ask questions about. And putting a third gender on a driver's license is something that I thought we should ask a question about.
So someone on Twitter said something to the effect, I think this is great or courageous, and you said, why is it great and courageous? Courageous.
Correct. And I believe that if I had said, that is great and courageous, awesome, that's great, I don't think we'd be having this conversation here today, Tucker.
So the question really isn't about objectivity. They're not asking you to be objective. They're asking you to toe a very specific line.
Of course. They're asking me to toe the line. They're asking me to agree with them. And they're asking me to, they're holding my feet to the fire to make sure that the orthodoxy wins out. And this time, they held my feet to the fire until my company said that that's enough, you're fired.
Do you see this as a trend? It's something that I've begun to notice where big companies have become the heavies for the cultural left. You think of big companies as conservative, but all of a sudden they're the ones who seem to be enforcing orthodoxy. Is that my imagination?
No, I don't think it is. I think big companies, a lot of big media companies are more or less encouraging the left. I believe that they, I don't think that they're objective. I don't believe that they want debate. I think they want us to conform to the prevailing ideology that's out there. And the prevailing ideology that's out there is leftist. And when the leftists take you on, they're big in number, and people are afraid to say anything against them. So they often win. They won a little while ago here in Vermont when they shouted Charles Murray off the stage in Middlebury when he tried to give a speech. That was on your show.
I know.
So, yeah, it's hard to disagree with them.
Or they take your job away. And here we are in the middle of the winter, and you're in Vermont, and you got no job. So our prayers are with you, Dennis. Good luck. Right. I hope you find something.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have you heard? UFOs may actually be real, for real, and the Pentagon spent millions of dollars investigating them. We're not insane. These are facts. We're going to talk to an actual journalist who's been working on that for a while and who exposed that secret program in the New York Times. Stay tuned. Well, you may not have heard about this, since apparently it's not a big news story somehow, but UFOs turn out to be real. We're not kidding. Recently, the New York Times profiled a secret $22 million Pentagon program that investigated unidentified flying objects. Doesn't mean they're from outer space, but they're not identified, and they're flying, and they're objects. The program wasn't bogus. Investigators found multiple aircraft encounters they could not explain, and they've even been storing metal alloy recovered from the vicinity of these encounters. Leslie Kean wrote about this in the New York Times, that piece in question, and she also wrote a book called UFO Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. She spent years investigating UFOs with the support of former Bill Clinton Chief of Staff, by the way, John Podesta. Leslie Kean joins us tonight. Leslie, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So that piece, I think, vindicated a lot of work that you've been doing for an awfully long time, and certainly got my attention, and I've stopped making fun of people like you and started paying attention. This seems like a huge story. So I know that it's vast and hard to sum up, but if you could just briskly tell us what we think we know about these sightings.
Well, we do know that there are objects in the sky and sometimes in the water that demonstrate extraordinary capabilities that experts say we don't have on this planet. We don't have the capability of creating the kind of technology or apparent technology that's been observed by high-level officials for many, many decades. The Pentagon program is the most recent discovery, but these things have been studied in other countries and by our country for many years.
So what percentage of these sightings are we sure are not weather phenomena or experimental aircraft?
Well, that's a really good question, because most sightings of UFOs that just people report are identifiable. I mean, we're talking about maybe 5 to 10% of all the sightings that are called in are not explainable. And the ones that are really of interest are the ones reported by military pilots, by commercial pilots, by trained observers, multiple witnesses, ones that are caught on radar, events that have a lot of data to support them and involve very, very credible people.
So I guess what bothers me most about this story is how clearly people who should have been following up and paying attention haven't been. And the case that sticks with me, November 7th, I think, 2006, at Chicago O'Hare Airport, 4:15 in the afternoon, gate C-25, I believe. The pilot of the plane waiting to depart to Charlotte looks up, and there is a saucer hovering not that far over the plane. People in the tower see it. Other pilots see it. Dozens of people see it. It's real, and the FAA refuses to investigate. How could that be?
I know, it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking to me. I mean, they refuse to investigate, I think, because they I mean, who knows what the bigger reason probably is that they can't explain these things, and they just they don't want to deal with them. It might frighten people. They don't have enough information. They don't like to say, well, there's something hovering above an airport, but we don't know what it was. So basically, they will come up with other explanations for it, such as that it was a weather phenomenon. That's what the FAA said about O'Hare, which is really an insult to the pilots who witnessed this thing and many other observers who know that it wasn't weather. I mean, it was a metallic-looking disc-shaped object that hovered over as you said, hovered over a terminal, it's gate C-17 for about 5 minutes, and then it shot straight up through the clouds. This was an incredible aspect of the thing. It was hovering below a cloud bank, and all of a sudden it just shot straight up really fast through the cloud bank and cut a hole in it. So there was like a cookie-cutter clean hole in the clouds. You could look up and see the blue on the other side. And, as far as anybody knows, as far as I know, and from what I've been told, we don't have machines in the sky that can do things like that.
But, I mean, this is not a potato field in Maine in the 1950s at 3 in the morning. This is Chicago O'Hare, one of the busiest airports in the world, in the middle of the day, in front of sober witnesses, including pilots and the control tower. And the FAA says, we're not that interested? Like, how could that be?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's very bad. I appreciate how baffled you are, Tucker, because I'm baffled, too. And you can imagine that the witnesses involved with this, it's an insult to them. I mean, there are many witnesses, and we're talking about military people, high-level people in the Air Force, the Navy, the other military commercial pilots who are just told that we're not interested in what they saw. And it's very difficult for a lot of them because they're patriotic people.
Well, yeah, I mean, what if it's the Chinese military? I mean, I believe you because you are, I think, the preeminent researcher on this question. But it beggars belief that the U.S. government would just sort of let it go. Anyway, I appreciate it. Leslie, thank you for coming on. It's an honor to have you.
Thanks a lot, Tucker. I appreciate your interest in this. Thank you.
Thanks a million. Time for Final Exam coming up. Will Fox Grand Champion Shannon Bream, winner of 9, get to 10? That's next. Well, your prayers have been answered. It's time now for Final Exam, where we see which news professionals have been paying attention to the news. We do that by pitting them against one another in a best-of-5 news quiz. Shannon Bream, as you well know, has entrenched herself as the master of Final Exams. Last week, she completed a full Brady Bunch, beating Chris Stirewalt to run her record to 9-0. Tonight, she goes for her 10th straight win against America's news headquarters host, Leland Vittert, a man famous for his news acuity.
And hair.
Yeah.
And hair. And general good temper, and good luck to you, Leland.
Well, I appreciate it. I've been studying tape of you.
Yeah.
And, I realize, you rigged Ducey's button so it wouldn't work.
Whatever.
You asked for hints with Jillian. I get
You're
this.
just
I'm
going to
on
make
to
her
it.
more ferocious, Leland. So I'm going to cut you off there and tell you the rules, which you already know since you watched the game tape. Hands on buzzers. I ask the questions. The first one to buzz in gets to answer that question. You have to wait till I finish asking it in order to answer. Every correct answer is worth a point. If you get it wrong, you lose a point. Best of 5 wins. Are you ready?
Yep.
Game on.
Okay. First one is a multiple choice question. Democrats are urging Oprah to run for president. Donald Trump was asked about this. His response, was it A, she's no stable genius, she ought to stick to TV, B, Oprah is a total tremendous loser, sad exclamation point, or is it C, I like Oprah, I don't think she's going to run? Leland Vittert.
C.
C. To the tape.
Oprah would be a lot of fun. Well, I like Oprah. I don't think she's going to run.
Again,
Wow.
oh, come on. This is so trying to psych me out. Come on, this is so trying to psych me out.
Yeah, you join a long list of people who began in
No.
pole position.
I know how this is going.
He got it.
And then fell.
I mean,
Congratulations on
yes,
getting that.
congratulations.
All right, let's
You only
say you
won
do
the
one
night.
question 2. Another multiple choice. The president just unveiled his latest nickname, this time for Senator Dianne Feinstein of California. What was that nickname? Was it A, Sleepy Diane, B, Sneaky Diane, C, Swampy Diane? Leland Vittert.
I'm going with sneaky.
Sneaky Diane, not Swampy, Sneaky, not Sleepy. Roll tape.
We do have this tweet last hour. What was it, 20 minutes ago? The fact that Sneaky Dianne Feinstein, here we go. Look out, Sloppy Steve. Sneaky Dianne Feinstein.
She's trying to lull me. I know.
Wow.
No, I mean,
okay, this is without precedent, but she is trying to lull you. I agree with that. Question 3, ladies and gentlemen, and we got some more Dianne Feinstein for you.
Oh, okay.
She gave an unusual reason for releasing that transcript of private testimony on the Trump dossier without consulting any of her peers, including the committee chairman. What was her excuse?
This is where Shannon asked for hints.
What was Dianne Feinstein's excuse? She did it unilaterally. She didn't ask the ranking Republican. She just did it. And she said, but I did it because...
I was off that day?
It's a medical issue. That's our first hint. It's something you can catch on the subway.
Narcolepsy?
I'm up by 2. I feel like I can't
from your child. Leland Vittert.
I'm going to just guess here based on the hints. A cold?
A cold.
Cold, flu, some type of...
Cold is the answer, and we will see if the tape ratifies it.
I don't make an excuse, but I've had a bad cold, and maybe that slowed down my mental facilities a little bit.
Here you go.
There you go.
That class in deductive reasoning paid off.
The answer was not narcolepsy, though close.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can catch that on the subway. I've caught it on the subway.
I don't laugh about narcolepsy. Okay, next question. Again,
can I ask the rules here? It's best of 5, right?
Right. So, I mean, you're 3.
But an incorrect answer puts you in down a point.
Yeah. Okay.
So anything can happen. It's a dynamic game.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't count your points until they're final.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you, Professor.
Another multiple choice. Americans still thawing out from intense cold weather. One place in the United States was colder than the surface of the planet Mars. Was it A, in the state of Nebraska, flat and cold, B, in New Hampshire, mountainous and cold, or C, the northernmost state on the East Coast, Maine? Leland Vittert.
I shouldn't have done that based on the rules, but I'm going with New Hampshire.
You're going with New Hampshire?
I am.
Okay. New Hampshire. Is New Hampshire the answer?
Mount Washington, New Hampshire. It's so cold they were blowing bubbles and they froze. And you can see the guy actually holding those bubbles as if it was a baseball. It feels like minus 100, tied for the second coldest place here.
This is the benefit of working on the weekends. Brian Yennis was doing that live shot on my show.
How could New Hampshire be colder than Maine? But you're right.
Yeah.
It's the tallest peak in New England, Mount Washington. Holy smokes. Okay. This is unprecedented, but we still have a question to go. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Be careful on this one. An iconic soda brand is making a desperate attempt to appeal to millennials, young people, by unveiling new flavors, ridiculous ones like feisty cherry, zesty blood orange, and twisted mango. Which brand is it? Shannon Bream.
Diet Coke.
I don't believe you.
It might be.
Really? Staid Diet Coke has a
point at least.
zesty blood orange?
Yeah.
Is it Diet Coke?
Diet Coke is getting a makeover. You may notice some slimmer cans there. They are up on your screen. And Diet Coke is unveiling some new flavors.
Holy smokes. This is a little bit like when Winston Churchill retired.
I know, but
it's kind of the end.
You're no Neville Chamberlain, though. He's no Neville.
I'm talking the post-war.
Oh, the post-war.
Well,
can I hand it over?
Yes, you may. You can hand. This is the coveted mouth breather mug.
Like I'm crowning the new Mr. America.
Well, I am gracious for you and your.
You're speechless. No, that's okay.
If you need to borrow the other 9 to make a complete set of 10, I'm happy to
up as I was going to lose. I didn't even have an acceptance speech written.
You got to be prepared.
I was asking you in the men's room earlier. Congratulations to you, Leland Vittert. Shannon Bream, you've been a fierce competitor, a terrifying competitor.
Looking forward to
congratulations.
Thank you.
9 in a row.
Congratulations. I'm going to retire now.
No. You have to go for 9 now.
Pay attention to the news all week, every week, and we'll be back next Thursday with another news quiz. We'll be right back. Well, if you've watched this show over the last year, you've seen us celebrate Chris Cuomo, the poet laureate of the cable news network. What began as gentle mocking quickly became admiration and then something like love as we watched Chris emit a jasmine-scented cloud of profound and haunting insights into the human condition. Yes, we initially wrote him off as a semi-illiterate buffoon, we'll admit that, but then we came to see the deeper truth. Chris Cuomo is an artist, a seer, a soul Sherpa, leading his people from the screeching chaos of this world into the blissful clarity of the next. He is a shaman. We are his acolytes. Or at least we thought we were. Now comes the disturbing news that Chris Cuomo is claiming to be something else entirely. In a recent interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Cuomo described himself not as the Eastern mystic we imagine, and we want to warn you, this may come as a shock, but merely a journalist. That's right, a fact man, a shoe-leather reporter, someone who doesn't let his own opinions get in the way of the news. That's why I came to CNN, Chris explained. Well, imagine our horror, our sadness, our bewilderment. Just a journalist? We knew him as so much more. Could this be true? Or is it merely a veil meant to confuse unbelievers, one of the 1,000 names of Vishnu? Here's the Chris Cuomo we know.
So why am I going? That's the job. There's a sense of duty. Think, act with your head, not just with your heart.
We got Chris going with an 88-pound Turkish getup, also known as a 40-kilo Turkish getup. There you go, bro. Excellent. Make it look easy. Let's go. Big step. Keep the belly tight. Awesome. Well done.
The hashtag stand firm. Please use it.
Just a journalist indeed. You're so much more than that, Chris. With abs like that, don't sell yourself short. That's it for us tonight. Tune in every night at 8 to the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and especially groupthink, trying to tell the truth in a world that demands lying. DVR it if you know how that works. And more than anything, stay tuned for Sean Hannity. He's next.